Hi everyone. I said we would get started right at 4 o'clock, so I wanted to do that, make sure we stay on track. First off, thank you for joining the webinar today. It's Work Smarter, Not Harder. This is a preview of our Conga Workflow and Conga Conductor Release 8 products. So for those of you who are not familiar, we've been operating on Conga Release 7 since our inception in 2007, and then in May we released Conga Composer Release 8, which introduced a bunch of new features like a new template builder, the ability to use text-based merge fields and Word templates and so forth. So we've been eagerly awaiting the release of Conga Workflow and Conga Conductor Release 8 to dovetail onto the Composer Release 8. And our dev team has been working feverishly on these for the last few months, and we're getting very close to releasing these. So we're calling this a preview today because these products are still in what we're calling pre-beta. We don't have them available for beta to prospects and customers yet. So what I have here is sort of a very, very pre-beta version. So I don't want to call it alpha, but they're still working out some of the details of the products, but you guys will get to see some really cool features that are in these new versions. So just before we get started, I wanted to introduce myself. I am Shelly Houlihan, and I'm a Senior Product Specialist here at Conga. I put my email address just up on the screen in case you all have any questions after the webinar. Please feel free to reach out to me directly, or you can always contact our support team as well if you have any questions. So before we dive into our agenda and so forth, I did want to go over a bit of a disclaimer / some cool stuff. As I said, these products are in a pre-beta status. So this is a bit of a disclaimer in that what you see today might change slightly to when we actually launch the beta and then the GA later on. Again, that might change a bit what you're seeing, but what's cool about that is that this really is a preview. It's like when you go to Dreamforce and they make you read that safe harbor statement because things could change, they're in flux. So I'm not putting up a full legal safe harbor, but just wanted to give you all a heads up that what you're seeing today is still a bit in flux, so certain things might change a little bit to when you see it in the next few weeks. Really quickly, we're going to go over what are Conga Conductor and Conga Workflow, just in case you saw the tagline on the webinar of Work Smarter, Not Harder, and you're not quite familiar what these particular products do. We'll do a quick overview, and then we're going to get into the actual previews of each of the products. So first off, what is Conga Conductor? It is probably my favorite tool that we have that you can add on to Conga Composer. It will batch process Conga Composer operations. So a really easy example would be, let's say you're using Conga Composer to generate invoices based off of an opportunity, but you're using the typical solution where you're having users click the button on the invoice to generate those, and then you can email them or e-signature or integrate with Google Drive, etc. But sometimes you might have a case where you need to generate, 50 or 100 or a few hundred of those invoices all at the same time or within a few days of each other maybe. So we came up with Conga Conductor about 4 years ago to solve that particular need where you can batch process those Conga Composer solutions up to 500 at one time rather than having to go through a report or something like that and click through to each of those 500 individual records. Conga Conductor will do that work for you. You still have all of the same features available to you that you do in Composer, like activity logging and all of the different output modes, like I mentioned, email and e-signature and so forth. We were just using Conga Conductor to batch it all up. So what's really great about that is that you're saving yourself a lot of time and effort. That can also translate into a dollar savings for a lot of people because you're not spending that human resource time, if you will, to click those buttons or links. It is a paid add-on to Conga Composer, so it is an additional cost, but oftentimes people say it saves them more money than it costs just because of that time and effort like we just talked about. It is a paid add-on, like I said, but we offer the free 30-day trial initially. So just like all of our other products, you can get your feet wet and see if it's something that you like before you have to commit and pay any money. And with the paid subscription or the free 30-day trial, we have the free technical support included, so our support team will get you up and running in no time at all. And then that last bullet is just to remind you, it is a separate package from the Conga Composer one, so you will need to install it from our website. The reason it's on our website and not on the App Exchange is because it's what they call a private App Exchange listing. So it is on the App Exchange and hosted there and has gone through Salesforce security and all of that good stuff. It's just that we don't want people getting Conga Conductor without first having Conga Composer because it won't work since it is an add-on. So that's why we just put the listing on our website to ensure that people first have Composer and then they can add on that Conductor package. So these are just some graphics to sort of illustrate what it is that Conga Conductor does. You can still grab any data from any object, output to your document format, and then this top one will show consolidated output. So you have either a zip file or a consolidated PDF of up to 50 records at a time. The bottom one is what we call distributed output. So again, it's any data from any object, just like Composer, but you're going to get individual files and then can distribute those via any of the options you see under flexible delivery options. So Google Drive, SpringCM, all of the e-signature options, HTML email, stored in Salesforce content, documents, etc. All of those options that you all are used to in Composer still exist in Conductor. And then with the Conga Conductor tool, a really cool option is that you can even have it run on a schedule. So that, to my earlier example about invoices, if you had to do that, say, on the last week of every month, you could just set it to that schedule so that, let's say, on the 4th Tuesday of every month, you just queue it up to run at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it emails all of those invoices out to your customer, so you're not having to get in there and run the batch. Okay, so really quickly we'll go through the same sort of bullet points with workflow. It's similar to Conga Conductor in that it is a separate paid add-on, but again the free 30-day trial is available, again with technical support whether you're in the paid period or the free trial period. So you'll work with the Conga support team and they're great. Again, it's a separate installed package, separate from Conga Composer, and again available from our website. It's that same private App Exchange listing situation. So what Conga Workflow does is it gives you the ability to launch a Composer solution via a Salesforce workflow rule. So what's so cool about that is that you can use, generally a field update is what people do. So let's say maybe to our earlier invoice example with Conga Conductor, maybe with Workflow, you want the invoice to be sent every time the stage on an opportunity changes to closed won. So that invoice automatically gets sent, the sales rep doesn't forget to do that, all the activities get logged automatically, a copy of it gets stored in Google Drive or content or whatever you like. So that's all happening as the result of that field update and using that Salesforce workflow rule to dovetail into Conga Composer. So again, it's an automation tool. The difference here is that you can't use a batch here. You're just doing one record at a time, but you're not having the user intervention or interaction like you do with Composer where you're having to manually click a button or a link. Because it's a Salesforce workflow rule, it's going to happen automatically. And then we have another little graphic here just to sort of explain Conga workflow. So you have a workflow rule like in that cloud at the top you'll see checkbox equals false. So if the checkbox field is false when the record gets edited, maybe a case review email goes out to the manager of the owner of that record or something like that. So, sky's the limit. People get really creative with workflow rules, but it's any workflow rule and then it'll kick off whatever Composer document process you want. And again, all of the delivery options, activity logging, again, all of the features that you're accustomed to in Composer work with workflow as well. So I have this little slide about let's see what these babies can do because we've had this little text-based intro, but I think it's demo time. Let's go ahead and see what the previews of these products look like and we'll take them for a little bit of a spin. So let me drag over my browser, blow that up for you all, make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so you'll notice that first off, I have a few tabs open just to keep this moving along, but I've already installed Conga Conductor and Conga Workflow. This isn't going to be a how-to or configuration on today's webinar. We're going to do that later once we actually release the products. But this is, again, just a preview of all the cool features that y'all are going to see. So Conga Conductor has its own listing in the app menu. And first off, what I wanted to show you is this Conga Conductor record. So this is where you're going to come, most likely, to launch your batch. And if you've worked with Conga Conductor Release 7, this looks largely the same. The only thing that you might notice is that there is a new button up here called Formula Builder, and there's a new field here called Version. So let's talk about version first. Just really quickly, the two values that are available are C8 and C7. Those just stand for Conga Release 7 or Conga Release 8. What's cool about that is that you can actually choose which version you want to run your conductor solution on. So some users might say, well, I have, some historical Conga Conductor records that are already running in version 7, and I don't want to move them over to 8. That's fine. You just select version 7 in your version field here, and then it'll run just fine. So I would recommend only making that field available to system administrators, just so that you don't have end users going in and messing with that. But all of those details and recommendations and installation instructions will be with the installation and administration guide, again, once we launch the actual beta and general availability launch. So the other feature that we talked about that's new is this Formula Builder button. And again, for those of you who have used Conga Conductor Release 7, the idea is that you take an existing Conga Composer solution. So I'm going to pull up an opportunity just to show you all an example. I have a button here called Invoice that will launch the Conga Composer user interface, but what I want to do is now take that and batch it up. To my earlier example, I want to be able to run up to 500 at once. So I'm going to take this button, if you will, but I need to convert it to a Salesforce formula field because that's what Conga Conductor is able to read. It's not going to be able to get in and read the button. It needs a field. So the most painful part in Release 7 of Conductor was converting that button over to a formula field. But now we have this Formula Builder feature that does that work for you. So let's go ahead and launch this and y'all can see what I'm talking about. It'll take just a moment. So it's already selected my master object as opportunity because on my conductor record, let me just open that up really quick once more. Back here on the conductor record, I had already input my report ID. This is who I want to be in my batch. So if I just click View Report really quickly, you'll see I just have 6 records because this is a development org, so I just keep my batch small for demo purposes. But again, you could have up to 500 records in this report, and you're just saying these are the opportunities that I want to generate the invoices for. It's who's in your batch. So because I already plugged in that report ID and I've told Conga Conductor I'm running this based on opportunities, then back here on the Formula Builder, it's saying, okay, we know your master object is opportunity. What would you like your output mode to be? So I'm actually just going to do a download for this, but you can see there's all of these other options, like attach to master object, deliver via email, and so forth. All of those options you're used to with Composer. So we'll select download, and then lastly, all we have to do is click in this name pick list, and it's saying, okay, I see that you have 2 different Conga Composer buttons or links on your opportunity record. The Conga Composer one is just the standard managed button. I want to use the invoice. That's my custom button. That's the one that I know will run all the correct components. And then you just get that little creating formula, and then here's your formula all ready to go. So you'll see the status message will update as you sort of move through the Formula Builder wizard. So now it says enter a name for the formula field or use the one provided and then click the create field button. So it gives you a default name of just invoice and then the letters CN that sort of stands for conductor, but let's give that something a bit more descriptive. Conductor opportunity invoice download. How's that? And then all we have to do is click create field, and it'll just take a moment. It's actually going out to Salesforce Setup and creating that field, and then we get a dialog that says the field has been created. Would you like to update the conductor record? All we have to do is click yes, it will tell us the record has been updated, and what it means is this conductor record that we were working off of initially. So you'll notice the URL field name has now been populated with the name of that field that we just created. And if I go into Salesforce Setup and pull up my opportunity fields, I'll just refresh the screen since we just added a new field. You'll see it's been added right here, Conductor Opportunity Invoice Download, just created a moment ago. So it's going to just add that right in there for you. It's done all of the hard work, and now all we have to do is launch. And this is all the same as Conductor Release 7. It's going to tell you how many records are in your batch and how many API calls you've used and all of that good information, and then we just run the batch and get the file. So we have 6 opportunities. I've used 806 API calls. I have a maximum of 15,000 in a 24-hour period, and then it's telling me the output mode is going to be downloaded to my computer. So I just click Start. Usually just takes a minute or so. I could minimize this dialog box if I wanted to and just come back to it later, but it should just be pretty quick here. The little part in brackets is telling you how many seconds is remaining. Conductor operation completed successfully. Click OK. So you can see this is still in beta. It's still on staging, so this one didn't actually generate my file, but like I said, this is a preview, so there probably was just a little glitch there on that server, but that's why it's a preview. So we'll just close that out. The other components that I wanted to show you all, in addition to that new version field and the formula builder, is what we call the Conductor dashboard. So this is another tab in the package, and this is really neat. This is again in preview mode, so we don't yet have any data to show here, but what it would do once it's all finished is that it will show you in the Conductor log on this left-hand pane each of the batches that you've run recently, and then you could click on one of those and it will show you if there were any errors, particular records in that batch that didn't go through. So it'll show you the record ID and then the text of that error message, and that's just really helpful if you had errors. Would be things like if you had a particular record that didn't have an email address but you had configured the Conductor output to be email, then that record wouldn't be able to have an email sent to it because it didn't have an email address, so that would show up in an error. This is just really handy to see how many API calls you've used. You can see where your usage status is good, or it'll go to, you know, average or poor as you get up into the higher limits. If you want to set an API floor, you can see that here in the middle, kind of on the left. I don't know if my cursor is showing there, but if you had maybe a data warehousing or data loader that you needed to do daily and you needed, say, a couple thousand API calls to be able to do that, you could set your API floor to 2,000, and then Conductor will not run if that API floor has been reached. It'll say you don't have enough API calls remaining and you could do it the next day or 12 hours later or whatever, when you've got some fresh API calls. And then just what your org ID is and what your account name is, that's probably more helpful for the support team at Conga if you're needing to activate a subscription or something like that. All of that information is handy right there. So this is going to be another great tool just for troubleshooting, making sure all your batches went through and if you had any records that errored out. So that's, again, another new component in the Conductor Release 8 that we're really excited about. So lastly, I will take you over to the Conductor Setup tab. And what's cool about this is that you now have the ability to integrate with Google Drive. That's a Release 8 feature. So we do that through what's called a Google Refresh token that uses OAuth. Just to log into your Google account. It will ask you to confirm access and so forth, and then it will be able to access your Drive folders and store the output files in those Drive folders. So whoever's logged in and creates that Google token is going to use their Google account. So you just would want to make sure if you were working with a partner or something that instead of having the partner come in and do this, that you actually have your system administrator or somebody from the company create that Google token. And then as long as the file where, or excuse me, the folder where you choose to store those output files is accessible by others in your company, they'll still be able to get to them. It's just that initial authorization that you want to make sure it's somebody from your company and, you know, the proper Google account. The Salesforce refresh token is similar. It's also using OAuth, but that's in order to be able to run Conductor on a schedule. So earlier we talked about maybe you want to run that batch of invoices on the fourth Monday of every month at 4 p.m. So we use the Salesforce refresh token to grant access for Conga Conductor to scan your instance and see if there are any batches that need to be fired on a schedule. So again, that's going to be done with OAuth, and you do that here. The API floor, we talked about that. That's just a different area where you can set that. And then the scheduled Conductor master switch, you just need to have that enabled if you want to be able to run Conductor on a schedule. It's just saying Conductor, again, will be scanning your instance just to see if there are any Conductor records that are set to happen on a schedule. I forgot that I didn't show you all where that schedule component is, so I'm just going to jump back to the Conga Conductor record. This was available in release 7 as well, but we've tweaked it a little bit. It runs really great in release 8. I'm not going to go through it because we'd have to schedule one to happen in an hour's time. I don't think you all want to sit and wait with me while we just see the schedule happen, but you just click schedule and it will ask you to set up when you want to have that schedule happen, so monthly, weekly, etc. It's saying unable to pull the schedule just because I don't have anything set up right now. So you have daily, weekly, monthly, you can do weekdays or every day, preferred start time, etc. And then schedule start date and end date. So if you only wanted it to happen maybe 2 or 3 months, maybe you're only doing this for a quarter, a calendar quarter, you could start it, you know, in November and then have it end at the end of January, something like that. So that's the scheduling piece, really cool. Just another great sort of automation tool in your toolbox. So that is everything I wanted to show you all about Conductor. I'm going to move along to workflow. And of course, we're going to have, I imagine you might have questions toward the end. So what we're going to do today is just have you submit those online. Excuse me. Pardon me. And then we'll send a follow-up email to answer those. So let's jump into Conga Workflow. I'm just going to close some of those tabs. Again, Conga Workflow has its own setting in the app menu, or value in the app menu. So if you click that, you'll see all of the available workflow tabs. Workflow does not have a record or a custom object to function off of like Conductor does, because you're just doing some back-end configuration, because it's the functionality is actually happening usually, like I said, based on a field update. Then you don't really need a record to launch from except for whatever record in Salesforce you want that field update to happen off of. So to my earlier example, it might be something like when a record is edited and didn't meet the previous criteria but now does, example, changing the stage to closed one, then that would kick off the workflow rule that generates the invoice document through Conga Composer and Conga Workflow. So if we go to the Workflow Formula Builder, it is its own tab because, again, it doesn't have a Conga Workflow record to function off of. It's its own separate tab. So here, instead of having the master object type locked in, you're just going to choose it here. But the rest of this is exactly the same as what we saw with Conga Conductor. You pick an output mode, select your button or link here, it would build the formula for you. You'd give the formula field a custom name and then just click that create field. The only difference is that it's not going to write the name of that field back to, again, a record because you don't have a record that you need to write it to. It's simply going to build the field in Salesforce Setup on whatever master object you've selected here. And then you would simply go into Salesforce Setup and build your workflow rule with an outbound message. So I'll show you all what that looks like. If we go to Create, I have a workflow rule that I built out beforehand just so you all wouldn't have to suffer through that with me. So let's say there's one here for invoice email. So I just have exactly what I showed you all. The opportunity stage equals closed one, and we're just having that happen anytime a record is created or when it's edited to subsequently meet the criteria. So before I had worked at Conga, I wasn't really familiar with outbound messages. I thought they sounded pretty scary, like some sort of development or coding thing that I would never learn or understand how to use, but they're actually really simple and very easy to use. I had only used workflow actions like email updates or task alerts, that kind of thing, but outbound messages are actually really easy. So I'll pull this up and show you all what it looks like. I just have a name and a description. You can punch in whatever you want here, but just something sort of descriptive. You select which object you want it to function off of. So mine again was opportunity. And then you're just going to punch in this endpoint URL. This is in our documentation. You'll just copy and paste it right in there, so no problem there. And then all you have to do is click Send Session ID. Let me edit this because there's one other field I want you all to see. Send Session ID, just check that checkbox. You'll send the master object ID, and then this other field is the one that you just created with the formula builder. Just one moment, we do have a question. Can you zoom in on the screen a little? It's very small on my screen. Oh, yep, sorry about that, Liz. Let me just bump this up a little bit. Sorry about that. Okay, hopefully that's better. She says thanks, so hopefully we can see a little bit better. So again, you're just going to use that endpoint URL. You just copy and paste that. Send session ID. This ID field here under selected is the master object ID. So in our case, it's opportunity ID. And then again, the Conga workflow invoice email is the one we just had the formula builder build for us. So that's all that's required. The last little component is that you have to set a user to send as. So this is just under whose authority are we sending this outbound message. Usually you want to set this to a system administrator just because it ensures that they have access to all the various components that are being used in the Conga Composer process. So access to records, fields, reports, queries, etc. All those sort of accessibility things you're accustomed to in Composer. Same thing applies in workflow. You just want to make sure that this user has access. The only other thing that could trip you up is that this user to send as, if you're using Google Drive, again, it's going to use their account or their login as the one that we're logging those output files into Drive with. So you want to make sure, again, this is someone at your company and has access to the proper folders that you would want to be saving those files in. That's all you'd have to do, and then if you just go back to your workflow rule, you make sure it's active. And you could go ahead and fire that off. So there is a dashboard available with Conga Workflow, just like with Conga Conductor. So again, this isn't quite finished. It's one of those super preview features that you all get to see today. We'll just wait a moment while this pulls up. So you can see, again, we're still in beta, pre-beta. Similar information that you're going to see here, but what's a little bit different is instead of the API limit that we have with Conductor, you're actually going to have a 24-hour limit for the number of workflow operations or clicks or service events, as we call them, that you can fire off in a 24-hour period. So that defaults to 500. You can talk to our support team about having that increased, or certainly if you want it decreased, you can just change that. And then that workflow usage status over here is going to function based off of that 500. So you have a 500 limit every 24-hour period. It's going to tell you how many you've used, whether you're at a good, average, poor status. Poor would be, you're at 499, you're really running out. And then in the panes down at the bottom, you have successful runs on the left. So it's going to show you the date, if it's requested, queued, the status, if there's a comment, and then failures, again with, these are just if there's any sort of error. So this is just a good way to go in and see what sort of queue to be sent out. If there's, the only reason it would not happen automatically or right away is if there was a lot of traffic across our workflow servers. Sometimes you can see a wait time of a couple minutes, but usually it's pretty much immediate. And then failures, again, would just be your errors. So that's really all there is to it with workflow. The biggest change from Release 7 is just that it's now a separate installed package. Previously with Release 7, there was nothing to install with Conga Workflow. You would simply go in and configure the various components. So now it is a separate installed package, which means you get really cool features like the formula builder and the dashboard. So that's everything that I wanted to show you all in the preview. And I'm just going to pull up this last slide to thank you for coming. I know probably your next question is going to be, when is the beta going to be available? When can we see this? How do we get access to it? We don't have a timeline yet on that because we're still in pre-beta status. Like I said, they're still fine-tuning some of these last components. But we will be extending an invitation via email, so keep your eyes peeled on your email inbox, and you'll be seeing that invitation. If you're worried that you're not going to get that, feel free to send an email to support@congamerge.com or to me, shoulihan@congamerge.com, and we'll ensure that you're on that list for beta. We do have one quick question here from Gina. If you already have Conga workflow, do you need to do anything since there is a separate download? So Gina, you wouldn't have to do anything. You could keep running on Conga workflow release 7. But what I would recommend upgrading to release 8 so you get those new features. You'll just, we'll have more instructions about that when the package actually becomes available, because there will be a couple of steps that are required if you're upgrading versus doing a new install. And then we can take one more question from Anne. Will conductor and workflow pricing still be combined? Great question, Anne. Yes, they will still be combined, so you can get one or both products in that package of service events, and they still have the exact same pricing. So great question there. And again, we'll release all those details again once the beta is available, and then of course with the general availability release as well. So thank you to everyone for attending today, and we're really excited to show you all these features, and I hope you guys are getting as excited as I am about Conductor and Workflow Release 8. I think there's really cool features that people are going to find really very, very useful, especially that formula builder. That's just my favorite part, that you don't have to manually convert a button anymore. So thanks again for attending, and we will speak with you soon. Bye-bye.